Okay, we're going to get started with our Guerrilla Talks. Guerrilla Talks are casual talks that Art Asia Pacific has been putting on for the last couple of days. This is our last day of talks. We invite curators, artists, collectors, gallery directors, today program managers for archives and so on, to come and talk to us casually for about 15-20 minutes. If you've got a moment, sit down, pull up a magazine chair. I should also say that it's the last day of the fair, so if you're interested in some magazines and so on, there's special deals and so on, about 3 or 4 issues there for about $150, which is I think less than half price. So have a look at those as well. And as we're talking, don't worry about, feel free to step in and look at the postcards, which is part of an installation by him and Cheng. Our guest today, our first Guerrilla talker, is Enoch from the Asia Art Archive, and he is the program manager and the coordinator for public programs at the Asia Art Archive, which, if you haven't been there, it's an archive of Asian materials related to contemporary Asian art, and I'm going to let him talk a little bit more about that. First of all, I'd like you to just kind of tell us where the archive comes from and what it's doing here in Hong Kong, because I know it's kind of changed over the years.
Yeah. So basically, as you have pointed out, we are an archive based in Hong Kong. We have a space at Sheng Wan on the Hollywood Road. Basically, the story started out around 11 years ago when Claire Xu, our executive director, finished her master's degree in London, and then she came back to Hong Kong to set up this organization. When she was doing her master's degree in London, she was doing Asian Chinese contemporary art, but then she couldn't access the material she needed. So she thought it would be great to have a systematic way to gather all this material and then make them accessible to the public. And that's why she came back to Hong Kong, set up the organization with one bookshelf, and leading all the way to now, we have over 33,000 items cataloged. And then we have moved from a smaller space to where we are now in 2007. So we started from Claire, one person, to a smaller team, to around 3 to 4. Now we have around 30-something people, around 30 people, full-time and part-time, both in Hong Kong and also in different places in Asia. We have researchers across Asia.
And can you explain a little bit about what they're doing? I know that you've just said, you've got researchers active overseas. I think in India, Japan, China, Indonesia, and so on. What do they do? Are they constantly sending you material, or? So
basically, they are like our ambassador or representative there. So what they do there, it's like you said, they collect material, and then from time to time they send them back to Hong Kong. But at the same time, they are also like documenter researchers on the ground to document different happenings. Especially there are places where a postcard is all you get, or say, for example, a performance art festival. It's hard to really find a catalog. So they go to these events and then document them. And of course, they also help us to build a network across Asia, and then to talk to different people and to connect different people across the world. So they act kind of like a instigator for different dialogues to happen, and the key role is to document the events, different kinds of dialogues, and then bring us the material.
Right. I've used the archive myself for research, but what other sort of functions do you think it has in Hong Kong? If people can visit the archive, what kind of things can they do there, or see there, or get out of it?
So we have a library space open to the public Monday to Saturday, 10 to 6. You don't have to sign in. You don't have to join as a member. You can just come and use our facilities. We have different kinds of material, including exhibition catalogs, magazines like Art Asia Pacific, and also a lot of different kinds of ephemeral and primary material, like artist sketches, artist letters, and then of course you can come and use the library facility, the computer, and it's all open to the public. So in that sense, people can come to a centralized place, and then to access the special material for related to Asian contemporary art.
And as a program manager yourself, what kind of things do you do? I have to admit, I'm not sure either. We always sort of have a chat and catch up or bump into each other at exhibition openings, but I'm not sure what your public programs really are about.
Actually, we have different kinds of programs. One of the many reasons that we do different kinds of programs, instead of taking the role as a traditional archive, simply cataloging, putting them on the shelf, we really hope to activate different kinds of dialogue, especially in the case of Hong Kong and also in Asia, where there is not a strong infrastructure for dialogues to happen, and also when the very idea or the nature of contemporary art is still rather immature or new in this part of the world. So what we do is we organize different kinds of programs, including talks, workshop, panel discussions, such as now. We are the official educational partner of the fair since in its inception 5 years ago, and then each year we present backroom conversations, and then we invite different professionals in the field, artists, curator, critics, writer, to come to Hong Kong to talk about specific topics and ideas. So besides all these talks and events, we also organize residency programs. Because we believe that simply putting things onto the shelf is not enough, and that is just one of the many ways to organize this material. So by having artists to come in, and we also had curator residency program, but basically by having different individuals to come in, and then they can provide alternative ways to interpret the very idea of archiving.
So who's the artist or the artists in residence at the moment?
At the moment, we have Map Office, who is a couple based in Hong Kong, and they are working on the idea of an atlas. So and territory. So they've been coming to the archive during the past few months, and then to look at all our material, and then to try to browse them and try to link them together through different ways, including using keywords, mappings, and then eventually they will do a project related to the artists. And earlier on, we had Song Dong from Beijing. He will be back by the end of the year, realizing a big project derived from his residency in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I bumped into him recently, and he said that he's going to continue working on that. Could you explain a little bit what he has in mind?
Yeah, he is going to work on the idea of calendar, because the calendar is a way to mark our memory. So he is going to publish a calendar of 36 years, if I remember correctly. And then through this calendar, he will sketches different events in the art field or related to the atmosphere of the art field. And then by sketching, he reinterprets and interrogates how history is documented, and also he will have his personal touch, and then he will write his anecdotes underneath this calendar. And then, as you can see, we will have piles of calendar over 30-something years, and then we will use this exhibition as a way to think about how history is perceived, and how memory is documented. And then he basically intervened into history with his personal memory. So that's another way to look at history.
So will that be an exhibition outcome?
Yeah, it will be an exhibition, and then there will be a performative, interactive element, which you will know more if you stay tuned to our program.
Right. Just a little bit more specifically about the fair. I know you've been involved, the Asia Art Archive's been involved in the fair for years, and usually you have a special project. From memory, last year there was a digitization of a large archive of Indian art history research. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think it sort of signals the direction of the archive in some ways, this process of digitization.
The last project last year. It's basically the archive by Guerrilla, who is an art critic, long-standing art critic, and also her long-time partner, Vivan Sundaram. So basically, we over the past few years, we have been digitizing their personal material. So by digitizing their material, you can sort of see the development of Indian contemporary art. So you have a critic, curator, and then you have an artist. So as a curator and critic, Gita receives a lot of different kinds of material from time to time, and also a lot of clippings, and she writes a lot. And then also Vivan is also very interested in the idea of memory and also what's happening in India. So by documenting their archive, you can sort of trace how Indian contemporary art has been developing. But at the same time, we try to digitize them and then to make it accessible to the public. Because before it's a personal collection, you wouldn't know about it until you meet them, until you go into the house and to see this material. But by systematically archiving them, digitize them, and then make them accessible to the public, we try to contribute to this fragment of this part of the history. So when people come into research about this area, so they will find a way. And then we will continue to expand to different kinds of archive in that area. Yeah.
Can I ask, I mean, it's a big field at the moment to document and archive and digitization. Some people will probably not be familiar with what that actually means. Are you talking about scanning a lot of documents and then making them available, for example, through the internet, through the Asia Art Archive site? Is that what will happen?
Well, as an archive, by digitizing them, we, of course, like you said, we scan them, annotate them, and then we put them in the library. If we clear the copyright, we can put them online. And then at the same time, we also see digitization as a process of preserving the material. So we try to make them accessible to the outside world, where people cannot, like I said, easily access to this material.
I'm interested to know the actual original materials. Did they need to move during that process of digitization? I mean, these are a large archive in India and we're in Hong Kong. How did that work?
For this specific project, we have a researcher in India called Sabi. So basically, he still goes to their house very frequely, and then to scan them, and then to talk to them. Of course, because we have to do annotation, so he has to talk to them. And then, for example, we have another project in the Philippines by Roberto Shabat. So basically, we work with our researcher in Manila. It's very close to Shabat, and then she scanned them and, like I said, annotate them, and then we work with a local institution. So we basically make 2 copies. One will be accessible locally in Manila, and the other set will the digital material will be also delivered to Hong Kong, and then will be accessible.
Right. And for this year's fair, what sort of things, if you haven't had a chance to go downstairs, Asia Art Archive has a booth there. I passed through but didn't have a lot of time to read. There's a lot of information there. Could you explain a little bit about what this year's project is?
Sure. The project is called Uncatalogued, the case of Oil Street Artist Village, which is right downstairs at the booth Z1. Yeah. And then it's a two-part exhibition. Part of it is here. The other part is at our library on Hollywood Road. It's a project about the Oil Street Artist Village. In the year 2006, a frustrated artist came to the archive with a box of material, and then she left us with this box, and then she cut tie completely with the Hong Kong art field, and then she left. And then this material, it's about the Oil Street Artist Village. And then in this Oil Street Artist Village, it was an artist village organically established around the year 1998 to the year 2000 for around 16 to 18 months. And then basically it was a government store. And then the government store, the department moved. So it was empty. And then initially the government wanted to sell the land, but then because of the economic crisis, so they couldn't sell the land. And then they opened the space for short-term lease. And then suddenly one artist lead to another. They moved in. And then the artist village kind of formed. But then, as I said, it was a short-term lease. So one day they received a post saying they had to move, and so some of the artists formed themselves as this Save Oil Street group. So they initiated this SOS campaign, Save Oil Street campaign, and then they talked to the government, they talked to the public, they organized different events around Oil Street to hopefully to extend the stay or to make it permanent. So this artist was the secretary from that campaign, and then she had a lot of material, including artist portfolio, and also the letters with the government. So you can see how they try to bargain and then negotiate with the official body, and then and then now it's. If you know the place called Cattle Depot, actually this is the afterlife of Oil Street. Yeah. So when they moved to Cattle Depot, they did some event and there were some receipts there. So she delivered the box to us in 2006. And then because of the very nature of the material, we keep them in our special collection room. And then last year, the box was discovered again, and then we initiated some programs, some kind of unofficial underground. So I asked around 7-8 people in the field, including artists, art critics, writers, researchers. We sat around to do a workshop, just to look at these materials, how and to think about how history is told. And then this year we have a booth here, and then we have been thinking about what kind of project we should do. So Oil Street came up again. So it's an ongoing. It's not a finished product that what you see. We are just trying to organize this material. By doing so, we ask ourselves a very idea about how history can be interpreted and how history is written. So we try to use a timeline and then to put up the material. But then on the timeline, while we were doing research for this project, you realize you will find more gaps. Say, for example, we realized there's a dinner happening in a government official's home. Who were there? Who was speaking? What did they talk about? We don't know. We couldn't find out. And then, for example, how would you mark the very first day of this piece of history? Even if you ask the first artist who moved in, it's not possible for him to remember which is the first day. And then there's a lot of problematics while you use the timeline, which is linear, to talk about history. So there's a lot of question marks that we have. So at the booth, we present the 16 to 18 month history of the Oil Street Artist Village life, and then at the archive, we try to use the site of North Point, starting from how North Point is formed as a community from the very first day where there's a road passing through, to all the way to a lot of reclamation, to developing to today, like a residential and also business area. All the way from then, all the way to Oil Street Artist Village, leading all the way to the future in 2020 about what's happening in the Hong Kong cultural infrastructure.
I'm wondering, we're going to have to wrap it up soon, but Oil Street seems to be quite symbolic and almost kind of legendary, I think, in the local art scene. And yet, delving into that history must have also perhaps changed people's perspective. Is that fair to say? Did your own sort of understanding or assumptions on that period change through this research?
I think it's interesting when you look at Oil Street. It's we can sort of understand where we are now, because if you look at some of the clippings and some of the ways that artists were trying to justify themselves or to articulate themselves to the government official and to the public, actually we use very similar kind of language to talk about arts, to talk about culture, to talk about the needs of the city, like software, hardware, which you have been hearing for the past 10 years of different projects like West Kowloon Central Police Station. When each time we have huge development as such in Hong Kong, Oil Street was a case that have been constantly cited. Yeah, so it when you look at this case, you can sort of see where we are now. Yeah.
Okay. Just final question is the archive supported by local government sort of involvements at all? Other places, public libraries and so on, are also trying to instigate archives. Hong Kong doesn't seem to be that interested in preserving its history a lot of the time. Is it an completely independent entity?
Yes, we are supported by the Arts Development Council, but the funding is not enough for the whole operation. It's around, I think, 10%. And for the rest, we seek different kinds of funding from individuals to private corporation, and then by the end of each year we have a fundraiser event, and then the costs will go into the archive for our operation as well as to our endowment. So that's how we operated financially.
Oh, good. Okay, well, this has been Enoch Chung for our first Guerrilla Talk today from Asia Archive. Thanks very much, Enoch, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.